Okay, hello and welcome to our weekly Wednesday night live stream. I am your host, Dana Morningstar, and this is a live stream that I try and do every Wednesday night at, at 8:30 at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Tonight we're probably going to go for about, I don't know, an hour and a half, just because it's close to the holidays and I have a million things to do, probably like most people around here. But if you are new to these live streams, welcome. And if you are returning, welcome. Also, if you would like to be notified when I do go live, you can text the words Dana Live, all one word, to the number 22999, and you will receive text alerts from me. So, hello, hello. Kenneth says, thanks for recommending The Undoing. Any other TV shows you recommend? I don't, nothing comes to mind right now. Give me some time to chew on that and I will report back. Does anybody else have any shows that they've found insightful? I think, regardless of the topic, that they would like to share. I will say the plan, I was just recommended a, it's actually a children's movie. It's by Pixar, which they make great movies for adults too, um, called Inside Out, and it has to do with emotions. So that is on my, that's going to be the next thing that I watch. And I'm very much looking forward to that. So let's see here. Tyler says, love your decor. Thank you. Yes, it's coming together. It's coming together. Um, so okay, let's see. Okay, Jack asks or is asking a question for Sarah, who says, when your love connection is physical touch and COVID-19 is saying no, how to cope without making your temperature rise in the shower and bath? Hmm. I guess I'm not 100% sure kind of what you're meaning by that, but I know physical touch, it's a love language. It's not even a love language. I think it's a basic human need. And I think a lot of people are struggling that with going without physical touch during COVID, especially if they are in the midst of, um, you know, ending a significant relationship or trying to keep boundaries around problematic relationships. And uh, it's tough. And outside of pets, animals are wonderful, uh, can be wonderful for that. A thought might be, if you're, depending on your situation, I would never advise or encourage anybody to adopt a pet if it's not a solid decision for them and they can't keep the animal. If you're in transition, another thought with that might be to consider taking in foster animals so you can foster them until they can find a forever home. So that's a possibility. Normally, I would encourage people to seek out like a chair massage, um, or just a massage in general from a trusted place. Um, Spending time with friends, these kinds of things. But with COVID, that just really changes everything. So um, yeah, I guess maybe supplementing physical touch with other with other love languages. Um, and letting the people know around you that you're struggling right now and that you really could use um, some, what are the other love languages, like words of affirmation, kind of quality time, acts of service. And if you have some um, some caring, compassionate people in your inner circle, or even if you don't, a way, another thought would be to kind of extend that is, um, if you are a person, spiritual or religious, contacting a local place of worship in your area and letting them know. Reiki groups also tend to be a very warm and inviting community. Of course, this is not to say that it's ever a good idea to just drop boundaries completely. And um, so healthy boundaries are always important all of the time. But if you're not a person who is into spiritual beliefs or religious beliefs, sometimes universal Unitarian churches are very open. There's atheists that go there. There's you name it, Wiccans, people that are Jewish, people that are Catholic, people, everything under the sun. And the uniting theme tends to be more of a humanistic. It's more about just people and love and connection, and without all of the um, kind of rules, structure, dogma of religion. So that's a thought. Um, oh, oh. Jack is saying, okay, I totally misread that question. The question, okay, my gosh. Okay, so Sarah's, let me go back and look at this again. I guess I still don't fully understand. I guess the Sarah's question, when your love connection is physical touch and COVID-19 is saying no, how to cope without making your temperature rise in the shower and bath. Okay, and Jack is thinking that that question has more of a sexual self-pleasure type slant to it. If that's the case, and Sarah's not here to kind of give us clarity, but does she have concerns with self-pleasure? Because, uh, you know, I don't see anything wrong with that. So if physical touch, if you're still kind of getting that same, um, you know, that same enjoyment from yourself that you can get from other people, then by all means go for it. Let's see. Okay. Um, let's see. So, okay. Okay. So where we left off last week, um, I had said that I was going to cover some, let me find this document, some of the kind of like what healing, some of the aspects of healing from narcissistic abuse, like what that looks like. And let's see. So I guess the first point, we could talk a little bit about self-esteem. So one of the first points that I wanted to make about self-esteem, because when we leave an abusive situation, more often than not, self-esteem is significantly damaged. And I think one of the quick ways that we can tell if this is the case is to see where our locus of control is and where we're getting our self-esteem from. Is it coming externally, or is it coming from inside of us internally? So for those who are seeking self-esteem externally, that tends to be through other people, through validation, through agreement, through uh, oftentimes it could be through degrees, through material items, um, designer purses, expensive cars, these kinds of things. The problem with all of that is when we're getting our self-esteem from things that are outside of ourselves, it's very fleeting. And then we're very much sent on an emotional roller coaster based on how things are going in our external world. And of course, this is very problematic if our self-esteem is dependent especially dependent upon other people. So if they don't like us, if they don't like what we're wearing, if they don't, any of these things, regardless of how constructive or well intentioned their feedback is, it can cut to the core. And it's just a very difficult way to live. Internal self-esteem comes from within, and we can tell when we have internal self-esteem because we're more able to keep our hurt feelings and our self-worth in two different buckets. So that internal self-esteem is that ongoing feeling of, you know what, kind of no matter what happens, I know that I have value, I know that I have worth, and I see that even if nobody else does. So kind of just bringing those two differences to light can make an ocean of difference, because it's one of those things, like if you've kind of been living your whole life with an external uh, sense of self-esteem, it might have been like, oh man, why am I so devastated? Why do I have such a hard time standing up to people? Why do I have such a hard time saying no? Why am I doing all of this people pleasing? Why am I attracted to problematic people? A lot of the answer to that tends to be we're seeking self-esteem from outside of ourselves. And another result of that is we tend to cling on to relationships, good or bad, because that's where we're getting our self-esteem from. And without those relationships, we feel like, okay, well, we have nothing. Or on a more extreme end, it can feel like uh, um, a kind of mad scramble, this unhinged anxiety of, if I don't have these relationships, then I am nothing, I am no one. It's almost like this ego collapse that can happen. And that's got to be a very terrifying and difficult way to live. So that's something to look for, is where is your self-esteem coming from? Inside yourself or outside of yourself? And then I wanted to talk about some of the results of low self-esteem. So these, uh, you know, might not be terribly obvious. I think most people, when they think of low self-esteem, they tend to associate that with maybe negative self-talk, or uh, kind of withdrawing from taking certain risks, or kind of putting ourselves out there. We tend to kind of play it safe, fly under the radar, if- maybe feel that we're some sort of version of stupid, you know, stupid, unlovable, unattractive, just not worthy across the board. So some of the results of low self-esteem: the first one is continual self-doubt. So this is a problem. And if you've been around these live streams for a while, you've probably seen this time and time again. And uh, so when we don't, when we're not grounded in ourselves, or we don't like ourselves, when we're trying to escape ourselves, or we're trying to get validation from other people, then the result of that is that continual level of doubt. We doubt our judgment. We doubt our perception of reality. We doubt our decisions. Um, it's a very difficult way to live. And so how this tends to go about on a day-to-day basis, it's asking other people for validation every step of the way. Do I look okay? How does my hair look? How does um, should I major uh, in this certain subject in college? What do you think? Is this and this is probably something, again, that you've seen time and again here, is the question of, well, what do you think? Is this a problem? What do you think? Is this a red flag? What do you think? And now that I'm more in tune with that and really see that as the kind of the tip of the iceberg when it comes to low self-esteem, and the problems that can arise from looking to other people to let us know whether or not something is or isn't a problem. This is one of the reasons I've made this shift, and kind of spinning questions around and asking the other person of, well, is this a problem for you? Because the reality is, we could be in a room, you ask 100 people the same question, you're going to probably get a wide range of answers. And then so asking other people what you should do tends to create more confusion than it actually does to provide clarity. So I I think it was last week that the gal was asking about a guy she was dating, and he was looking he was subscribed to some, I forget what it was, like members only or kind of very sexual in nature type forums, and looking at a lot of porn. And that was her question, is this a red flag? Is this a problem? And that was kind of my intention with answering that question the way I was to try to get her to think about, it's truly not whether or not I think it's a problem, it's whether or not she thinks it's a problem. And if anybody out there, whenever you encounter something and it doesn't sit right with you, and you're like, yeah, I don't think that works for me. That's okay. This is all part of just knowing yourself and knowing your boundaries, your standards, and your deal breakers. So anything can be something that's not workable for you. The person might have 10 kids. The person might not want kids. The person might be really messy. They might be very tidy. They might smoke pot. They might not want to smoke pot. Do you see what I'm saying? There's a wide range of things out there, and it's such an individual thing. And this is why it's so important to know yourself and to know what is nourishing for you and what's draining for you, and where your own boundaries are with certain things, what your own likes and dislikes are. This doesn't have to mean that the other person's a narcissist or a sociopath or bad or wrong. It just means that there's differences there. And once you're more in tune with truly being honest with yourself about what does and doesn't work for you, that's when your life radically begins to change. So, and that's really difficult to do. It sounds so strange to think, like, to just be honest with ourselves, but I tell you, decades of kind of social programming about how we should act, how we should think, what's rude, what's polite, everybody gets so off track with how they truly honestly feel about certain things. And that's a big part of healing, is reclaiming that. And when you get more in tune with what's nourishing for you and what's draining for you, what's comfortable for you and what's uncomfortable for you, and then being able to assert yourself or get some distance, set some boundaries one way or another, that's when your life just really starts to work. And that's when you'll start learning how to trust your judgment and be more in tune with things. So unfortunately, I think a lot of the common advice about trusting judgment, it tends to be from people that have never experienced manipulation at a very high level. And so they don't understand where this lack of trust in other people or lack of trust in ourselves truly comes from. And again, I've seen this time and again where it's kind of this mindset of, oh, well, this person just hurt you, and it won't happen again, kind of a thing. And for those of us that have, especially those of us who have experienced multiple abusive people throughout our life, that's one of the reasons that advice doesn't stick and doesn't resonate with us. And we have so much resistance against it because we know deep down, I think there's more I'm missing here. Like, I can't just take your word for it that the world is a safe place when my when my eyes and my reality tell me otherwise. And the reality is that the world is not a safe place. It's a neutral place, but it's not a safe place. It's only as safe as in large part, our boundary standards and deal breakers can make it. But even then, there is a small percentage of the time things just happen. Things happen outside of our control. But um, I don't know. I don't mean to add fuel to anybody's, anxiety driven fire as it is, but I know for me, realizing, oh, okay, I don't have to try to convince myself that the world is a safe place. And there's nothing wrong with me for refusing to believe that, because that's this Pollyanna thinking. Like, that's not logical, and it's not grounded in reality. The world is just neutral. It's full of lots of different types of people, you know, and different types of experiences. And, um, knowing what's for you and what's not for you will take you a long way in keeping yourself safe. Okay, so then the second part of a result of low self-esteem is a low degree of self-protection. And self-protection mainly in terms of assertive communication, boundaries, standards, and deal breakers. So we can tell, so I'll read you this list real quick. Here are some signs that your ability to be self-protective needs work. Number one, you can't tell the difference between a safe person and a dangerous person. But let me elaborate on that real quick. We don't have to tell, and sometimes more often than not, we can't tell right off the bat. So if somebody walks in the room and you can't tell if they're safe or dangerous, that's fine because nobody else can either. The truly dangerous people of the world fly under the radar. The wolves in wolves clothing, most of us can spot because and it's not how they look so much, it's the behavior that they have. It's that boundaryless behavior where they're, they're threatening, they're acting wildly inappropriate, and they're acting unsafe. They're threatening, they're very loud, they're aggressive, verbally, emotionally, psychologically, physically. They seem to not have respect for the boundaries of others. These kinds of things. That's what makes for a dangerous person. Sometimes we can see that right away, and sometimes it just takes time. Okay, second sign, our ability to be self-protective needs work. We're quick to drop any and all boundaries if somebody is nice, attractive, friendly, or funny. And I'll add to that, or if they share the same beliefs as us. So, like I was mentioning earlier with religion, uh, this is very common, especially in communities where we tend to think, oh, this is a safe place. People who are here, they get me, or we have somehow have the same moral code. And again, the reality is everybody's different. And we might have the same religion, we might have the same type of um, situation going on or same type of struggles, but that doesn't mean that they're necessarily a safe person. It just means that we happen to have these things in common. So, okay, the third sign is we trust others completely upon meeting them and think that doing anything less than this means we have trust issues or are hypervigilant. And this goes back to what I was saying before about how kind of I've seen, again, with a lot of different mental health professionals, life coaches, you name it, there's tends to be this default belief that um, if a person isn't so readily able to trust, then they have trust issues, or it must be because of some sort of previous trauma. And sometimes it's not that. Sometimes it's just simply that they realize, hey, the world is a mixed bag of people. I don't have enough information yet to know whether or not this new person is safe. So it all kind of ties back into trusting your judgment and knowing what is nourishing, what's comfortable for you and what's uncomfortable for you. So, and it doesn't matter what anybody else thinks. So that goes back to trusting your judgment on situations. And if you're feeling unsafe, that's all that matters. It doesn't matter if you're in a room with 100 therapists and they all disagree. If you're uncomfortable, then you're uncomfortable. We don't need um, to put ourselves in potentially dangerous situations to prove a point or to heal from anything. So I often give the example of somebody walking behind us in a parking lot. You know, it could be that they're just in a hurry to get to their car, could be any number of things, but it doesn't matter. We don't have to figure out their intentions if they're trying to hurt us or if they're just really busy. We don't have um, to get tangled up in, well, I don't want to be rude. If I stop and go back into the store, or if I cross the street, or if I, grab my phone and call somebody, not taking action because we're afraid of being rude, these kinds of things. So when we're grounded in ourselves, we're grounded in our boundaries, we're able to be like, you know what? Um, my intention here is to get myself to a place of comfort. I don't know this other person's intentions. I do know that this makes me uncomfortable, and maybe it is nothing, but I'm going to just err on the side of caution because I don't like being uncomfortable. So I'm going to call a friend. I'm going to grab my mace. I'm going to do whatever. This doesn't mean that you have trust issues or that you're hypervigilant. So let's see. Okay, we talked about looking to others to validate our decisions before taking action, and why that's a problem. Okay, the next point is when we have concerns about somebody's behavior, we automatically assume that our instincts are wrong. And then we interact with them in basically giving them the benefit of the doubt. Then we interact with this other person as though they don't have concerning behavior. And we think that we need to stay in this situation until we have concrete proof that they are, in fact, untrustworthy or dangerous. And this is another point that I've mentioned in previous live streams of if um, the the confusion, if you kind of tighten up your boundary standards and deal breakers to be like, okay, we don't need to know if this person's really cheating. We don't need to know, we don't need to have that concrete proof that they're embezzling funds or that they're doing any of these kinds of, if they have squirrely behavior that leaves you perpetually confused, that they can't readily and adequately explain. And if if they're defensive, if they're denying it, they're blaming, they're blame shifting, doing all of these kinds of things, all of that squirrely, confusing, crazy making behavior. If you tighten up your boundary standards and deal breakers to be like, you know what, I don't do this. These situations, if there's doubt, I need to have that doubt resolved, because anything less causes me unnecessary mental anguish. And I don't want that. I don't want that at work. I don't want that in my personal life. I don't want that with my family. I don't do that, because you don't need to do it. And if a situation is on the level, it can be cleared up with the 3-minute conversation. So, um, yeah. Let's see. Okay, next point. You keep abusive or destructive people in your life thinking that they would never hurt you like they have with others, and that our relationship with them is special and different. This is often the case when we know that they have, this is, I think, more extreme circumstances where, I've seen people, date a person who's had a history of domestic violence or whatever. And, um, or they're hearing all around town that this person's really dangerous, and, and, kind of thinking, oh, well, okay, that might have been the case, but my relationship with them is going to be different. Or you could even extend that to a person that's been abusive to you before and thinking, no, next time will be different. Our relationship is something special. Surely they're going to eventually come around and see that and begin to appreciate me and treat me the way that I want. So that's in large part just a very large level of denial. And when denial is present, especially in dangerous situations, we can't keep ourselves safe. And that's a problem. So, yeah. Okay. So those are the points. This information that I was just reading off to you, this comes from my book, The Narcissist's Playbook, where if you're interested in this book, you can find it on Audible. You can find, well, pretty much anywhere. Barnes and Noble. Well, I don't even know if that's still around anymore. Amazon, Audible, all of the places. So, yeah. Okay. Let's see. I've got some questions. People emailed me as well, but let me kind of jump back to the chat and see how things are going in there. Okay. Oh, I like this. Adjourn says, can you please talk about green flags? Absolutely. I can absolutely talk about green flags. So, green flags would be Green flags, there's so many. It's basically a lot of the opposite of the red flags. So green flags would be somebody that has open, honest, sincere, solutions-oriented communication. So somebody who can, which includes being assertive and being willing and able to have an honest conversation. So they're not engaging in, blaming, shaming, spinning the conversation, yelling, screaming, all of this more emotionally immature behavior to get their point across, or uh, their their ability to communicate leaves you feeling like you know where you stand, and it leaves you feeling calm and safe and seen and secure and appreciated and valued as a human being. There's dignity and respect that are always present, especially when they're frustrated and especially when they're angry. Eh, That can, that can be a little challenging, but there's lots of people out there that know how, that do have the emotional maturity in order to engage like that. Um, and here's the thing too with green flags. Oh, so okay. So they respect your boundaries. So it doesn't become a power struggle. They understand the concepts of dignity and respect, and that this is something that is just given. It's given to other living creatures. It's not something that you need to earn. And people always want to fight me on this with respect about the difference between, well, um, the difference between respecting the person and treating them respectfully. We don't have to respect the person. If you're in a room with somebody who's a murderer, let's say, we're probably not going to respect them. But it's still understood that the basics of human behavior is to treat other people respectfully. So we don't need to agree with them in order to treat them with uh, respectfully, or with the level of respect. Um, so let's see. A lot of the green flags, because it can be difficult to confuse somebody being on their best behavior with green flags. And it's just been my personal experience that the true green flags of whether or not a person's emotionally safe really come out when conflict or disagreement of any kind is present. And you've probably heard me talk before, like there's different stages of a relationship. There's that initial infatuation stage where this is when everybody seems to have green lights. Everybody's on their best behavior. People are trying to seek out common interests, common ground. There's definitely this sense of relatability. And, both people are trying to form that connection with the other. With time, once that connection's formed, that's when people start kind of relaxing and getting more real. And you see this a lot at work. You've probably, if you've, like most people, you've been this person at work. How you are during an interview versus how you are a year into the job tends to be very different. So, or different enough, you know. Um, so seeing how a person handles frustration, how they handle differences, how they handle anger, how they handle the difficult times. How do they handle disagreements? How do they handle losing? How do they handle being sick? These kinds of things. Pre-COVID, I was a big fan of. I think a great first date activity is to go to a what do they call them? Like a puzzle room. That's not the word. Escape room, kind of a thing. One of those places, or to play some sort of game that involves either teamwork or winning and losing, like bowling, these kinds of things, instead of just going to a movie where you're not engaging at all. So seeing how a person is under pressure, under stress, that'll give you a better idea of how compatible, kind of where their level of emotional maturity really is, and where their coping skills are. I'm trying to think some other green flags. Really, I think respecting boundaries is just such a huge one. Do they continue to fight you on your boundaries? Can they communicate effectively? Are they open? Personal growth is another big one. Are they open to personal growth? Do they have any sincere desire to learn? Do they think self-help stuff's just stupid? Do they have, what is their level of insight? Because to me, that's a deal breaker. If a person's not able to be introspective, if they're just not able, uh, if they're not able to admit that they're wrong, if they're not able to work towards that solution, then there is no relationship present with a person like that. There's only a power struggle. These kinds of things. How they treat other people is big. Things that are less seen. You know, um, how how honest are they the, when they think nobody's looking? Um, kind of what's their history with being reliable across the board, with taxes, with their credit score, with paying their bills, with their family. What kind of friends do they have? And you know and we talked about this last time too, but kind of asking yourself, is this the kind of person, character, especially character wise, that I really want in my life? And does this person make for a good teammate? So it's making that shift from being attracted to somebody just purely based off of like physical looks to it's so much deeper than that. Physical looks only take a person so far and they fade. So it's really not a good idea to have just a relationship based off of attraction. It's truly based off of things that are much deeper and much longer lasting. So, yeah, just some thoughts. Okay, so let me scroll up here. Adjourn says, even though my long distance boyfriend shows with actions that he genuinely cares for me, I'm still so hyper vigilant. He's so patient and loving. How can I stop worrying and relax? Well, I think it'll depend on how long you've been dating him, how often you guys see each other, how often you stay in communication, and how, if there's any specific things going on that tend to feed into that anxiety. Is it anxiety or fear that he's going to find somebody else, or that he's already found somebody else, or that he's going to become abusive? Kind of pinpointing what is the concern there. And once you have more of an accurate, once you can kind of put a face to that monster, then you can begin, to battle it, basically. Long distance relationships are difficult, and they do require a lot more, I think, reassurance and time and communication than an average relationship, because you're not with that person every day. And, the long distance relationships can easily become more fractured than I think a regular relationship. And that's why there's that need for more communication, boundaries, um, that level of like emotional safety, ongoing communication, these kinds of things. Okay. Okay, I think Kate was agreeing with, we can't assume a person, we can't assume their character based on their profession or based on their religion. And she says, I agree. My covert narcissist has a master's in counseling and was a pastor, a silver-tongued wolf. Yes. There's, they're out there in all different professions, walks of life, you name it. There's problematic people out there, big time. And it's, yeah, they can do a lot of damage, especially when they're in the counseling profession or as a pastor. It just makes me sick to my stomach to, ugh, that kind of stuff happens. Um, Shakira asks, has anyone had the experience where you feel less tolerant of people after narcissistic abuse than you were before the relationship? So y- I can just speak for myself. Maybe some other people will answer this in the chat. Absolutely. I felt less tolerant for a couple different reasons. So I think at first I was a lot, I don't know if I would use the word less tolerant, but I was very leery of other people. I didn't want to be around them because nobody really understood. And I felt like I was just being continually re-victimized by a lot of well-intended bad advice, um, about, oh, well, you just need to move over it, or you should be glad it wasn't worse, or um, kind of all of these minimizing things that people say that just doesn't help at all. It just brings out more anger in a person. So yeah, less tolerant in that way. I was less tolerant down the road uh, of people crossing my boundaries, less tolerant of just kind of BS and nonsense, all of that. Uh, I spent quite a long time really feeling almost paranoid and very anxious, thinking, oh my gosh, is everybody a narcissist? Like I'm coming across like deeply problematic people on a regular basis. I feel like they're coming out of the woodwork. This was not the case before. It is now. What's going on? And that was very anxiety inducing. And of course, hindsight being what it is, I now realize a lot of that had to do with the fact I was just starting to see problematic behavior clearly for the first time ever. That those kinds of people, that kind of behavior had always existed around me, like it does most people, but I'd always minimized it. And, or it kind of just made up justifications for it. So now that I wasn't doing that anymore and I was realizing, hey, this is a problem. And, um, I'm not gonna do crazy making. I'm not gonna do perpetually confusing. Um, I was cutting people out of my life right and left, and the new people coming in, it was definitely a big period of tumultuous change, and it can be a lonely time when you're getting all of this stuff, sifted and sorted, and trying to get the right people in the right seats, kind of thing. So, like, it's a process, and yeah. So, and I guess to kind of elaborate on that too, part of that process tends to be at first there's that feeling of, oh my gosh, is everybody a narcissist? Why do I keep attracting narcissists? Is it me? Is it them? I think I'm losing my mind. And then realizing, okay, no, I think I'm just waking up more to this, and it's just out there. Um, but like I said, I was cutting people out of my life right and left. And to some degree, I think that definitely needed to happen because there were a lot of people that just had problematic behavior across the board. However, there were like a handful of people that I think had I used assertive communication with them, a lot of those issues could have been resolved. But I didn't, I thought I did. I thought I had a pretty good understanding of how to be assertive and how to know when my boundaries are being crossed. And I really didn't. I was just just learning to crawl in that kind of a way. And so that it just took a while. It took a while to really get grounded in that. And it's a process, even still today. So, yeah, kind of learning how to handle difficult situations. And uh, it's like that song that was a Kenny Rogers song, The Gambler. You got to know when to hold them, know when to fold them, know when to walk away, know when to run, kind of a thing. It it takes some practice and it takes some time doing. There's people, a lot of the people that cause perpetual confusion, um, you know, ongoing crazy making, assertive communication wouldn't have helped with that. And I didn't have the energy, the time, or the desire to even try. 'Cause it's just like, I don't even know what you're doing. Like, you're playing games right and left. It's just exhausting, and I'm done. So, yeah. Okay, so let me Creative Ingenuity says, "I used to be an owner, to a forum, so I know about dealing with people." Yeah, that's isn't that something? Uh, yeah, I can relate. It Forums are interesting. It reminds me a lot. There's so many dynamics behind running a forum that people just don't see. Like, you don't see it as a member, or you see some degree of it as a member, but when you're behind the scenes, it's to a whole nother level. It reminds me of that older movie, Best in Show, how just kind of like crazy everybody can be in super niche communities, and it's kind of the different challenges that present themselves, and all. It's just it's its own journey, and I don't mean that. um, I mean that in more of a, when you come across, there's, you guys know, like, there's just certain personalities in a group where you're like, what? Oh my gosh. And it's kind of draining or exhausting. But by and large, in a like-minded community, it's hands down more rewarding than it is exhausting. So uh, let's see. Um, okay, let me. Delnora asks, why do I attract these people in my life? And so, so that question, and I've talked about this before, um, but for those who are new, there's a difference. There's what's known as locus of control, and it's basically, where do we place our level of control? Is it within ourselves, or is it outside of ourselves? This is a very significant shift that really needs to happen and tends to happen during healing from this. So this is all about getting grounded within yourself. When so let me we'll kind of use this question because this is a great example of that. So when we're asking, why do I just keep attracting people like this? That's more of an external locus of control. Like, why does this keep happening to me, kind of a thing. Whereas an internal locus of control, the shift in mindset would be, I can't help who I attract, but I can control how long I keep them in my life. So, can you see the difference there, where the power lies? If we give the power to other people, or to some sort of, um, unseen force, that we're just some sort of a magnet for narcissists or whatnot, then we don't really have much power over that. Or we're going to do all kinds of, jump through all kinds of hoops in order to try to stop being a magnet. I will tell you, the way to stop being a magnet is to make that mindset shift of, we can't control who's attracted to us, but we can control how long we keep them in our life. And the reality is, problematic people are attracted to a wide variety of people for a wide variety of reasons. You've probably seen daytime talk shows or read blogs or heard from other mental health professionals about how predators can kind of sniff out their victim, and they just know this person, that's going to be their next victim. Well, and this gets under my skin like nothing else, because it really feeds into this fear frenzy of victims, of, okay, well, then I need to not be a victim. Okay, well, what does that uh, you know what does that look like? What does that mean? And so a lot of the articles will say, okay, you got to walk with a purpose, walk with your shoulders back and your head up, and don't smile too much, and don't be too helpful. They're really attracted to empaths. All of this kind of stuff, and by and large, frankly, it's a bunch of garbage. They're attracted to a wide range of people, and they might be attracted to one person because that person does seem meek and vulnerable, but they might be attracted to somebody else because that person's powerful, and they enjoy the thrill of taking them down or ruining their life. Or they might be attracted to somebody else because that person has money or social status or a place to stay, or they might simply just be attracted to who they're attracted to. They might have a thing for blondes. You know what I mean? I don't, you name it. Um, but sometimes their predatory behavior is intentional, and sometimes it's not intentional. It's more of on a subconscious level for them, where they're not aware that they're a predator, or they're not aware that they're a problem. They feel entitled and justified, and they're just living, they're lost in a paper bag. Like, that is that dysfunctional behavior. So so that's the thing. Bound and the only true repellent for a narcissist or a sociopath is boundaries, standards, and deal breakers. It's not tolerating crazy making or confusing behavior. So, and you setting the pace, that's a big one. You setting the pace, and kind of releasing yourself from those shackles of feeling like, well, I don't want to be rude, or I don't want to miss out. What if this person's wonderful? Or um, all of this stuff, really being grounded in, what, these are the terms and conditions that work for me in my life, and they apply equally to anybody that wants to be in it. So, if some smooth talker comes along and is just schmoozing you and saying everything that you want to hear, and um, wanting to move pretty fast, saying, hey, what do you, I want to go out tonight. Can I see you tonight? Or can I come over to your house? Or they're sexting you, or they're sending very sexy messages, all kinds of stuff. It's important that we see that behavior for what it is. A person who's really pushing sex early on is looking for sex. They're not, more often than not, they're not looking for a relationship. So, that's not the behavior of a person who's looking to impress another person, or to date, to court them, or to kind of grow a relationship. When a person has sincere interest in another person, they have manners. So if a person doesn't have that, if they're treating you like an afterthought, if they're treating you like plan B, if they're treating you like a sex object, um, they're moving things along quicker than you like, then if that's not okay with you, and I would hope that it wouldn't be okay with you, stand your ground. And this is where so many of us can get tangled up, because the natural inclination is, especially if we want the situation to be other than it is, if we're like, but he's so cute. He's so funny. He's so amazing. He's so smart. He's so whatever, or she's so whatever, right? This person really just checks so many of the boxes. I just want to believe that I'm wrong. I want to believe that this behavior on some planet, in some sort of alternate reality, isn't a problem. And we're looking for reasons to try to justify it so that it's not a problem, so we can keep this relationship or whatever it is going. But that's just deluding ourselves. So this all goes back to being honest with ourselves when something's a problem, and realizing, if this is the criteria, excuse me, if this is the criteria that you have for your life, if somebody if doesn't meet that criteria, then they're not for you. You didn't lose out on anything. They're not your people, you know? So um, getting grounded in that, it's a lot easier to walk away from situations, because you're able to realize, this situation wasn't for me. So, okay, let me go to I have two questions here that I pulled from emails. Um, let's see. Jack, you had emailed me. I emailed you back. I decided I think your question is probably better uh, via personal email. So I will get on that here in the next few days. Um, okay. So this is from Chris, who says, "Hi, Dana. First, thank you for your live stream. The things you said have helped me more times than my psychologist. I appreciate that." It says, "Yesterday I had an issue with a friend of 25 years. He wouldn't take no for an answer and was making me angry because I get angry when people don't respect my right to refuse." Uh, Side note, okay, that's an appropriate response because that's a boundary violation. Okay, back to his letter. I told him what he was doing to upset me, made it very clear and explicit when I told him I was muting him for 24 hours on Facebook. He said, "Okay, bye. Sorry you're upset," which just made me even angrier because even after my telling him specifically and explicitly why he was upsetting me, he tells me that instead of saying sorry, he upset me. It's like he lives in a fantasy land in which he can't cause harm to anyone or where nothing is his fault. That made me angry enough to block him. I don't feel bad for blocking him. 25 years is a long time, and we were really good friends to the point where we could just drop in on each other whenever, and it was cool with either of us. But now things have changed. I have to admit, I've been getting really low levels of sleep, which has left me short tempered. I feel guilty. I feel guilty that I don't feel guilty about blocking him, if that makes sense. Why don't I feel bad about blocking him? Warm regards, Chris. And okay, so Chris, here's my 2 cents about this. I think you really see the situation clearly and you did everything that a person could do to handle it. So he crossed a boundary with you. He wasn't, so he crossed a boundary. You were assertive and said, "Hey, this is not okay with me, and this is why this is not okay with me." So you spelled it out for him. He didn't own his part in that. So he didn't agree that, that with you, that there was a problem there. He felt validated for whatever reason to cross that boundary. And sometimes that can happen, but that's not kind of that inability to see when we inadvertently cross somebody's boundaries is a problem. And it's definitely not conducive to having relationships continue. So, um, it sounds like, you've known this guy for 25 years. And if he has consistently lived in a fantasy land in which he can't cause harm to anyone and nothing is his fault, it's understandable that you feel angry because that kind of behavior is outrageous. And again, it's not conducive to having relationships with other people. There is no team orientedness in that. It's very much a one-way street, right? So he's going to kind of just run around like a bull in a china shop and expects everybody else to just be okay with that. Well, that kind of behavior wears thin over time. And it sounds like the reason that you don't feel guilty about ending or blocking him after 25 years is you've had enough. And you're seeing this behavior as this continual boundary violation that it is. And you're seeing this relationship as kind of this one-way street that it is, where he's not going to own, he lacks that ability to see how his behavior at times negatively impacts you. And that's very difficult to have um, a relationship of any depth with a person like that. So that's my guess. I think he just got sick of it and had a, you're sick of it, cut off ties, and um, implemented some good boundaries there. Okay, so this is from Demetrio, who says, "Dear Dana, recently I had to exit the new relationship when my girlfriend opened up about being in a parallel relationship with another guy for 6 months. That guy has had his own relationship with a civil wife who does not know he is cheating on her. Oh boy. She told me it is going to end sometime in the future and asked me if I could wait." It went on for a couple of weeks. Then one day she told me what great sex she is having with him and that they should do more of it. I said that was hurtful, that I'd had enough and left. Should I have waited for her to leave him? Was it right to protect my boundary? It would be useful to mention that she is part of a kind of in a cult together with this guy. Sincerely, Demetria. Okay, uh, you absolutely did the right thing, and here's why. So, well, for starters, she was cheating on you, and that's outrageous that she says, "Yeah, and okay, I'm cheating on you, but I'm going to end it sometime in the future." And then what she's basically saying is, if you could just stay um, kind of waiting in the wings for me, if you could just stay on the back burner until I decide that I'm done fooling around with this other guy, that would be great. So, no. No. I'm a big fan of if continuing a relationship means sacrificing our dignity, then we don't do it. Doesn't matter how cute she is, doesn't matter how funny she is, doesn't matter, does not matter. That kind of stuff is outrageous, and I'm sure it's painful to cut things off to some level, but at the same time, um, you did the right thing. Hands down, did the right thing with that. So, yeah, never be somebody's plan B. Know your worth, know what you bring to the table. And if other people don't see that, then it's time to walk away. Not stay there and wait for them to hopefully someday see it, not try to earn their love or affection or respect, um, and none of that. Sort of like, you know what? You're a human being, you have value. I'm sure there are lots of things that are great about you because, there are for most people, but they're knowing your worth and realizing, hey, I'm not going to compromise. I'm not going to be somebody's side piece. And plus honesty, not even to mention, if honesty and trust isn't there, then what is there? At that point, you're basically just hanging out with the person and having sex. And that's not really a relationship, but it's just hanging out with somebody and having sex. So, um, yeah. Yep, treating yourself with value. It sets the tone. It helps to keep your self-esteem intact. It helps kind of across the board, and it helps to set the tone for how other people will respect you because it lets them know I'm not going to tolerate that. And I think you would be wise to cut ties completely and just don't look back. My 2 cents. Okay, let's see. Let me hop in the chat. Right? Helpful Mom says, yeah, I think the fact that she was helping this man cheat on his wife was the first red flag. Yeah, that whole it sounds like this woman was just a whirlwind of deception and deceit and th- th- if trust and respect and dignity and honesty are not there, then there's nothing there. We're just fooling ourselves at that point. So MS Moon Grable says, hey, how often are y'all live? I try to go live every Wednesday night at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. The length of time varies, but actually while we're on that topic, if anybody's interested in getting a text alert for when I do go live, you can text Dana live to the number 22999. If you're in the US or Canada, I should say, you'll get a text alert from me. So you can be notified. Okay. Um MS is saying, yeah, boundary setting is a huge part of codependent recovery. Yeah. And frankly, I would even extend that and just saying it's just a huge part of being a human being. And boundaries are something, as children, they're very rarely honored or discussed or encouraged. In fact, the opposite tends to be very much the case, where it's, children tend to not be allowed to be upset or angry or sad. Um, Sometimes that's intentional, sometimes that's unintentional, but that tends to be the message. And, children are encouraged, oh, kind of everybody needs to be your friend and you need to get good grades in every subject. And there really isn't this sense of autonomy or getting to know yourself that's instilled within kids. So there isn't this, um, yeah, that sense of autonomy just really isn't cultivated to the extent that it needs to be. And the downside to that, or the result of that, a downside and the result of that tends to be that as a person gets older and they develop more responsibilities, relationships become more complicated, they don't know how to behave in them. And so then they're kind of chugging along, things are working well enough. And then boom, they encounter like a deeply problematic person. Then they start seeking, they're kind of crawling into therapy or seeking out help, trying to figure out what happened. And then that's when they start learning um, about boundary standards, deal breakers, how to get grounded within ourselves, assertive communication, all of these things. So let's see here. Um, yes, absolutely. UNA says, healthy validation comes from within. It's unfair to put that expectation on the other. Absolutely. And the reality is at the end of the day, we are the ones that have to live with the choices that we make, not anybody else. So it can sometimes be helpful to get feedback or to get opinions or whatever. But at the end of the day, we have to be the ones that make that decision. And if we're uncomfortable with something, then that more often than not means that there's something that's uncomfortable about that situation. And then we need to see about, okay, how can this level of discomfort be resolved? And you know, and then work towards resolving it. I have again, I've seen so many people, myself included, kind of get all tangled up in this thinking, oh, well, I have a certain coworker and I don't know that they're just, it's weird. Like their behavior towards me is just kind of creepy and weird, but I can't tell if it's really creepy and weird because you see my ex was, or I had an abusive ex or an abusive parent. And it's very easy to go down that wrong bunny hole thinking, okay, this is the issue. Ah, okay, previous trauma. Okay, that must be connected to why why you're having all of your spidey senses going off with this new person. And like I said, it's been my experience personally and professionally that about 99.9% of the time, it's when you feel like something is off, it's because something's off. And um and again, more often than not, this is the challenge too. It's knowing when to be knowing what type of self-protection to use. So when to be assertive and when to just cut ties. So and I think it just depends on the issue that's I don't know, it's kind of a fine-tuning process that tends to happen in time, frankly. But you kind of get a good sense for it once you start seeing that stuff clearly of, oh, is this um, you know, I don't know. Uh is this squirrely behavior? Is their behavior designed to create more confusion or crazy making, or is it a kind of a benign or boundary misstep. What's going on here? And then you'll know too. The problem is you being assertive with somebody who is seems to enjoy provoking and enjoy causing confusion and crazy making and pain. That can really land a person getting all tangled up. So, because the more assertive we are, especially if that other person is manipulative enough that they know the things to say and can keep you around, but then the reality is their behavior doesn't change. They might just get better at hiding it, or that behavior comes out in a different way. So they might, let's say, for example, you've got an issue with them. I don't know. Being hypercritical. They're just criticizing every little thing that you do. You feel like you just can't win. And you mention that, and maybe they say, oh, I really didn't mean to do that, blah, blah, blah. And then maybe they stop doing that, but then that behavior takes another turn. And now all of a sudden they're doing silent treatment, or they're slamming cabinet doors, or they're stomping around, or they're just creating this icy, this unbearable level of tension, this kind of thing. Or they seem to just be provoking fights. You can kind of tell if you ask yourself, do you have this issue with other people? That's been kind of, I think, one of my saving graces are being around people like that, because it does, it gets you all tangled up, and you're like, I I can't tell which end is up. Who has the problem here? Is it me or is it them? Like, what is going on? But if you're like, okay, do you have this problem with other people? If you don't, then odds are it's not you. So because people like that tend to provoke and agitate, and until other people explode, they tend to have that issue with everybody, or not, maybe not everybody, but a lot of people in their life. And um yeah, so just something to consider. Okay. um yep. MS says, yeah, like the Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde tame version, though. Yep. Yeah, that's another thing. I don't do Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde stuff. Like, and I don't think it's unreasonable to just be like, I don't do that. I don't tolerate that. I don't want to be held emotionally hostage or walk on eggshells. I don't do that. So if a person's frustrated, I don't even care if it's not at me. God, I used to have this coworker. This was years ago. And unfortunately, to kind of add to the mix, she just kind of had that like resting bitch face. So she always looked angry. So that didn't help the situation any. But so you really couldn't ever get a good read on her anyhow. Um, and it was just very difficult. We were always walking on eggshells around her, and more times than, well, who knows? She would say that it was stuff at home, but I think there was stuff at work, but she would never address it. So then you'd spend the day, rehashing every conversation, analyzing, God, did I forget something? Did I, you know, just in fear of, oh my God, what have I done? How do I make this better? How do I get this to stop? Basically. And me and another coworker actually sat her down. We had several conversations with her about it. And we're like, if we're doing something, just let us know. Just let us know, because we can't do this. Like, it's not, it's causing way too much stress, you know? And she would say things like, well, no, it's just stuff at home, and this, that, and the other. But at the same time, there's that level of accountability of, then you need to leave it at home, kind of making everybody else's life a living hell when you're at work, and creating this tense, icy environment where you're just snippy and you don't want to talk and you keep your door shut and you act like you hate us. That's not cool. Like, that's not how emotionally mature adults handle things. And, just again, kind of knowing these things of, where your deal breakers are. And um, assertive communication can only go so far. If that person's not willing to meet you halfway, you know, then you got to figure out what the next step is. Okay, so let me see here. Let me scroll up. Okay, Alexis says, what if somebody who spent years with a narcissist ends up numb and having an affair, which then actually helped them to see the narcissistic abuse better? Are they now a narcissist? No, not necessarily. This is the problem. This is the problem with kind of dysfunctional behavior in general. It's like quicksand. And we were talking yesterday about the drama triangle. And the drama triangle, it's a victim, rescuer, victim, persecutor, rescuer. And when we're in that drama triangle, we just kind of tend to slide around between all three positions on it until we find our way out. And the way we find our way out is through boundary standards, deal breakers, assertive communication, and just not engaging and not engaging in that. And I would say appropriate accountability is also a big key with getting out of that drama triangle. So when a person's in it, especially at first, when they're not aware that they're in a drama triangle, when they're mistaking that drama triangle for like a quote unquote normal relationship that just has some issues, then um, they tend to sink deeper and deeper into that quicksand. They become, they're starved out, especially with the narcissist as a partner. You're starved out emotionally. There's um, it just gets a person all kinds of tangled up and feeling very alone, feeling unlovable, feeling unworthy, feeling like the problem, um, all kinds of things. So that result of feeling numb and then moving forward to cheating, when it's not uncommon, I should say, people tend to cope in the best way they can at the time, given kind of given their circumstances. And whenever there's what's known as like maladaptive behavior. So maladaptive behavior being, okay, this is how this person was or this is how this person coped at this time. Nobody chooses to become an alcoholic. Nobody, people don't tend to consciously choose really destructive behavior. Although with cheating, sometimes they do. Sometimes it's to kind of even the score. But sometimes it can just happen where a person's so emotionally starved out and um, they find somebody that starts treating them with like a human being with care and compassion and concern. And next thing you know, they're in bed with them. So I'm not justifying that. It's definitely still a problem, but that tends to happen more often than not if a person's being just especially emotionally starved out or emotionally abused in a relationship. So um, So no, that doesn't necessarily mean you're a narcissist. However, it does mean that it's definitely worth looking at the previous relationship and uh, yeah, kind of doing an inventory on some of the damage that's been done to you emotionally, as well as kind of different ways that you tend to cope with that emotional pain. So yeah, yeah, we all cope in the best ways we can at the time, and uh, it's worth exploring, especially if it's out of character. You're like, gosh, I'm just not the kind of person that would ever cheat. I don't know what happened. I don't know how I found myself here. At a minimum, if that's the case, then if you've been walking around feeling just emotionally starved out and unloved and unimportant, then more, my guess would be that that's now a vulnerability. So it's something to keep your eye, not even to keep your eye out. It's worth taking your time to explore so that that vulnerability um, doesn't become exploited time and again by other people. So, um, let's see. Let me scroll up here. I guess I'll say too, if you have any questions that you're comfortable with me answering on the live stream, you can either email me them at deardana@thriveafterabuse.com. You can, if you've subscribed to the text alerts, if you're in the US or Canada, you once you're subscribed, so texting Dana live to the number 22999. You can also text questions there, and I will do my best to answer them on the next live stream. If they're deeply, well, also let me know what name you want me to refer to on the air. If it's anonymous, or if it's a fake name, or if it's your real name, or what. If it's deeply personal, or if it's a question that I just, um, kind of have some concerns about, depending on how full my inbox gets, I will try to email you back personally. Let's see. Scrolling. And Jeffier asks, is somebody trying to pull you into gossip and even forcing that conversation part of the triangulation? It's just so exhausting. I'm no contact now. I mean, it could be part of the triangulation. It could be any number of things. Um, I guess the way that I view gossip, and not to say that I have never engaged in it, I absolutely have. But once I saw that behavior as problematic as it really is, it and the reasons behind why I was doing it, it made it a lot easier to disengage from it. So I think some people they just like the tea. They just like to stir the pot, and it's just a way for them to pass the time. It's entertainment. That gossip, it's one of those things. If a person's gossiping about somebody else to you, you can make damn well sure that when you leave the room, they're going to be talking about you. So it's not emotionally trustworthy behavior to start with. And second, something that I think for anybody that's struggling with boundaries, gossip, if we're engaging in gossip or venting, which can come across as a positive thing, which it's not necessarily not a positive thing, but it can be problematic if we're only using venting instead of actually taking action. But venting and gossiping tend to both be signs of there's been some sort of boundary violation that's occurred, and it's kind of our brain's way of trying to make sense of it and needing to work through it. So that can be a really great sign to be like, oh, okay. Um, if I find myself talking poorly about somebody, it's like, that's what it is. I have a boundary that's off balance that I need to address. And you address the boundary, you get that in place. All of those that kind of that anger and those hard feelings tend to just dissolve. So yeah, engaging in gossip, it's just, by and large, it's a huge waste of time. It doesn't contribute to anything good. And even if all the information's true, it just tends to cause more damage than anything good. Let's see here. Hold on, let me Scroll, scroll, scroll. Oh, yep. Thank you. Helpful Mom says, before you leave the chat today, please be sure to click or tap the thumbs up button beneath the screen. This helps feed the YouTube algorithm, which can make Dana's channel more visible. Yes, I would agree. If you like these live streams, please let me know. Please either give me a thumbs up. If you don't like them, go ahead and give me a thumbs down. But either way, if you could give me some feedback in the comments afterwards or email me with feedback and let me know. Because I tell you, being out here talking out loud kind of to myself, it feels like for hours on end is, I can only do the best I can do. So uh, yeah, I really do value you guys' feedback. That's a great way to put that. Helpful Mom says, I've spent the better part of my life believing that everything bad that happened in my life was entirely my fault. I now realize that's not fair to the other responsible parties. Yes. That part of assigning appropriate accountability is huge, 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 huge. Untangling that, figuring out, um, how am I perceiving this event? If it tends to be in very black or white terms, where, or, okay, like, uh, or kind of, or probably more accurately, with a sense of hyper accountability, that tends to be more from like that wounded child response of thinking that we're more powerful than we are. Oh, you know what? I didn't eat all my vegetables at dinner, or I was, you know, I don't know, I got suspended from school. That's why mom and dad got a divorce. It's all my fault. Or, dad, I don't know, mom or dad left. They abandoned me when I was a kid. It's all my fault. That kind of thing. When the reality, like that more adaptive adult response is realizing is it has to do with assigning appropriate accountability to other people involved. So the adult response would be, hey, I was a kid. you know, I didn't make my dad or my mom scream and yell or abandon me or uh, do all of these things. They were the adult in the situation. So I didn't have that kind of power. And while I might have been a very challenging child, maybe I was really frustrating and kind of, um, difficult, hyperactive, or what have you. It's still the kind of expectation of appropriate behavior is more so on the adult because they're the adult. So regardless of what kind of child you were, being abused, being abandoned, being neglected, being none of that was your fault. None of that it was something that you caused. Um, it it's not. That's on the person that hurt you. So yeah, assigning that appropriate accountability goes a long way in healing. I would say it's a pretty significant step in healing is just figuring out because if we don't assign that appropriate level of accountability, then we tend to carry a lot of what's known as inappropriate guilt. So we're walking around feeling like we've done something bad or wrong. And that can lead to a lot of shame, feelings of I'm not good enough, I'm forever flawed, I'm broken, I'm unlovable, all of this. That's that that's where I was talking about kind of that all or nothing thinking of, okay, this one event happened and then, okay, nope, it's over. I'm forever broken. There is no chance for me kind of a thing. That tends to be that wounded child perception and that wounded child response where the adaptive adult response has more perspective and they're able to see, okay, yes, um, this event happened, but it doesn't mean that I have to internalize it and it doesn't have to define me. So maybe you really did. I don't know, maybe Or even as an adult, like let's say I don't, you had some things, you went into foreclosure, you lost your home, or you had bankruptcy, or you had a divorce, or whatnot. Paying attention to what are the messages that you're telling yourself about this, even being with a former abusive partner. Um, in making that shift is the messages that you're telling yourself about this, that you have terrible judgment in men, or that um, that I just attract these people, I can't help it, kind of a thing, or um, um, you know what, I'm absolutely willing, something is better than nothing, or gosh, at my age, I, I should be glad for whatever relationship I could get into. What messages are you telling yourself about this? Or, oh gosh, I had these traumatic events happen in childhood, nobody's going to want me, I'm just forever damaged goods. And then providing more balance to that with that adaptive adult response. So doing that goes a long way with getting a more balanced and accurate perception of yourself and of situations. Yeah. MS says, yeah, or wanting to go back to one of those abusive partners because of a life stressor. Yeah. Oftentimes the message behind that, kind of putting trauma bonds and aside, but that can be sort of like, if this relationship ends, then I'll have no one. What will become of me? If this relationship ends, I'm just going to die because this relationship was my everything. Or absolute, this feeling of absolute fear and terror of, if this relationship ends, then what? And that can lead to a lot of catastrophizing. Well, gosh, then I would be homeless, and then I'd be out on the street, and then this, and then that, and then this, and then that. And it can be really easy to get caught up in that. Um, but it's important to take a few breaths and figure out really, like, what are my options here, and uh, providing some more balance, and realizing that really, if a relationship ends and we feel like that we've absolutely lost ourselves in the process, or that we're somehow going to just die without this relationship, that's a really good sign that some time spent cultivating our inner circle and cultivating our support system is very much in order. So unfortunately, a lot of people that struggle um, kind of with anxious styles of attachment, or some codependency issues, or um, distrust in others, tend to have very few relationships, and then when they do this very, very deep dive, but the result of that can be um, you know this terrible fear of this relationship ending, just feeling absolutely debilitated or emotionally devastated when this relationship ends, because they've poured all of themselves into it. Okay, so, oh, thank you, Sable. Says Dana, Santa left this for you to spend on kitties. I appreciate that. Thank you very much. So Lori says, Merry Christmas, lovely community. I am off to bed, early to bed, wake up at 8:30 in the morning. I will be alone for Christmas and Christmas Eve, but I am totally okay with that. So, well, Merry Christmas to you. Happy holidays. Merry Christmas. Happy Hanukkah, whatever. Happy Festivus, whatever you are celebrating this holiday season. I just wish you all so much light and love. And I guess I just really hope that you realize that that truly the biggest gift out there is, this is going to sound way more cheesier than I intended it to be, but it's the gift of getting to know yourself. And, we talk a lot about healing. And for those that are new here, I think it's really just important to realize that this journey to healing can sound like this massive undertaking, but it's not. In many ways, it's not about becoming a different person or becoming anything. It's about unbecoming. It's about taking away all of these layers of dysfunctional messages and programming that we've all picked up just throughout life. The core of you is still there, and there is still so much that is good and right about you, and you are worth getting to know, and you have value, and you are worthy of being treated with dignity and respect simply because you are alive and on this planet. So I guess with all of that said, I am going to sign off for tonight. So thank you guys so much for being here, and just lots of love to you as always. You are not alone, you are not crazy, and you really can move forward and heal from this. So take care, and I will see you next week. Okay. Good night.